I'm Taylor Jarman, back out at Appleton Area Health Services, and we are again joined by our friend Kelsey Tollefson. Kelsey, thanks so much for having us out today.
Yes, thanks for coming over.
Oh, of course, it's our pleasure. Really appreciate the time today. And today we were talking about it a little bit earlier, having the conversation around kind of mental health in southwestern rural Minnesota and kind of some of the treatments available. Why don't you just open up with a few kind of thoughts to kind of open up this topic?
Yeah. So I think it's an important topic to talk about because mental illness is actually very common. There are statistics out there that say 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 adults will struggle with a mental illness in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So when you start to think about your friends and family and coworkers and acquaintances, that's a lot of people.
Absolutely.
You know, and then you apply that to rural Minnesota or southwest Minnesota, south central Minnesota, and starting to think about, well, if there's that many people that struggle with a mental illness, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
How do we help them? What are the treatments available?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's an important conversation to first identify what's going on.
Yeah.
How many people does it affect, and what are those illnesses?
Definitely. Well, and then I think that's a great segue into, especially as we talk about how many people it does affect, and in our area, what are kind of most commonly some of the conditions that you guys see?
Yeah, so hands down, depression and anxiety are the top 2 most common diagnoses that I encounter.
Yeah.
Depression is classified as major depressive disorder, as well as there's other depressive type disorders, but that would be the most common.
Yeah.
And what that means is that somebody has a depressed mood for a period of time. Maybe their appetite changes, their sleep patterns change. Maybe they experience anhedonia or a lack of interest in previously enjoyable things.
Yeah.
People maybe tend to isolate, an increased need for sleep. All of those types of things would indicate that there may be a depressive episode occurring.
Yeah.
And actually, those symptoms only need to be present for approximately 2 weeks in order for a depressive episode to exist.
Sure.
So that's a relatively short amount of time to experience those symptoms.
Yeah.
So depression would be one. The other most common diagnosis would be anxiety.
Sure.
And I think we use that term a lot. You know, we're anxious about this or anxious about that or stressed about different things.
Yeah.
And that's actually quite how common it is. It's when people feel overwhelmed, nervous, anxious, on edge, restlessness, racing thoughts.
Yeah.
Inability to slow down your thoughts and your body, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Well, with as many conditions, there are also, of course, with the symptoms, a lot of precipitating factors. And so when you start to look at what are these causalities, you know, whether that's family history, personal history, things like that. What do you see most common in leading kind of these areas of depression and anxiety?
A couple different things. Biology can play a huge part into it. Genetics, kind of what you're born into and the makeup of that. So if you have a history of depression and anxiety in your family, there may be a chance that the next generations may have some of those things or traits of those things. But also our kind of social factors can play into our mental health as well.
Yeah.
So say, for example, farmers. It's been a tough year for farming, right?
Yeah.
Everybody talks about that.
Yeah.
But those stressors can actually impact a person's mental and emotional well-being. When a person is exposed to a very intense stressor for a long period of time, those things can cause depression, anxiety, or potentially other mental health issues as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes geographical location can play a role in mental illness, depending on the person's ability to cope, their resilience, all of that type of stuff can determine the outcome for their mental well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. When a person is considering, like, say, they think they might be experiencing some legitimate cases here of depression and anxiety. What do you most commonly recommend for kind of identifying this in yourself and saying, okay, I think I'm at a point where I might need to go see someone?
Yeah. So that point would be if it starts to impact your ability to function. So if you can no longer wake up and go to work like you used to, or it's a major struggle to get up and get yourself going, if you are withdrawing from your family, friends, acquaintances, if it affects your ability to function in any type of way, that's a major indicator that something needs to change.
Sure, yeah. And at the point where I guess they would decide this, they say, come to you guys. What are some of those treatments that you start to look at?
Yes. So in the mental health world, there's various different types of treatment. Here in Appleton, we provide individual therapy and medication management. And honestly, those things can be kind of scary for people.
Yeah.
It can be, oh, something's wrong with me. I've got to go talk to a therapist or a counselor, and now I'm crazy, right? Like people's stigma about mental health.
Totally.
So if that's the case for some people, you can start by seeing your primary doctor and explaining some of your concerns related to your mental health. And if need be, they can prescribe medications or give recommendations for other types of treatment.
Yeah.
So therapy would be one of those. And basically what people do is they come in and they talk.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's pretty low key. We do an assessment to figure out what's going on, what's the mental health issue, what's the diagnosis if there is one, and then we start with treatment.
Yeah.
If a person is not wanting to do sit-down therapy, then there can be like medications that can help with a chemical imbalance in their brain as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, and you brought up the idea of stigma. I was wondering, especially in light of our demographic, our area, what are some of those common stigmas attached to, oh man, is there something wrong with me? And starting to consider those questions.
Yeah, so when we talk about stigma, people often think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Wow, what did I do to deserve this? Or people are going to think I'm crazy or lock me up, or people are going to think that I'm not motivated to hold a job, or I can't hold a job. We have a pretty negative connotation with mental illness. But when you think about it, 1 in 4 people struggle with a mental illness. So a quarter of the people will experience something like that, and a quarter of those people, they're not all crazy. They're not all, seriously unable to function in some type of way.
Right. Sometimes
it's just a high or a low in your life, and we need to treat it like a health condition rather than a plague of some sort.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm certainly not a medical professional, but just even like kind of processing through this idea of stigma compounding with the original condition, what are some of those concerns and complications that you see as those two things kind of compound on each other?
Right, so there's lots of barriers that get in the way of people receiving treatment. So we have the stigma, we have the illness, and we know a lot of people who have an illness won't get treatment because of the stigma, right? So some of those barriers are, first off, stigma, second off, transportation, medical coverage, and then a lack of availability of medical providers that can treat those illnesses in our region. It's an increasing population of health issues that maybe haven't been addressed in the past. So we're kind of lagging behind in some senses, but working really hard to treat people the best that we can.
Absolutely. And so recently, what are some of those steps do you feel like have been taken in a positive direction as you guys look to kind of changing this?
Yeah, so locally here in Appleton, we believe heavily in an integrated medical system where our primary care staff and our behavioral health staff work hand in hand.
Wonderful.
And we do that because sometimes people will present either on one side or the other, but the health issues are so integrated. So we all work together to provide the therapy, the medication management, a referral for a physical, or lab work, things like that.
Yeah.
So we believe very strongly that it's important to have counseling and mental health medication management right here in the medical clinic.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Kelsey, we really appreciate you just unpacking this for us, and especially as prevalent as obviously this tends to be not just in our area, but worldwide and in our culture, we're seeing this more and more. Just appreciate you taking the time to give us the tools and talk through a little bit this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. This is Taylor Jarman out at Appleton Area Health Services.